Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Vanilla Minecraft. We've made it to episode number 2, quite the accomplishment if I do say so myself. So, we're heading on down to our mushroom cave that we started in episode number 1, and I want to make quite a lot of progress on that project today, but before we do, there is one thing that I have to say, and that is thank you. The reception to that first video has been absolutely mind-blowing, and I do mean that legitimately. I was maybe expecting 1/10 of the reception that video has gotten so far, and it's been crazy. Seeing all of your comments, all of your suggestions, everything like that has been absolutely awesome. So, again, thank you guys for that. It's been awesome. So, here we are in our cave, and like I said, we want to get a lot of progress done today, so we're really going to need to book it. First things first, we only have one mushroom so far, and for our giant mushroom cave, well, that's just not going to cut it. So we're going to go ahead and build that second mushroom that we never quite got around to in episode number 1. Now, I'm going to do this all in one go. I'm going to kind of speed the process up. We're not going to take a bunch of time like we did on the first one, but hopefully this serves as a little recap to show you what really goes into building these mushrooms. Once this one's in place, well, we'll go from there. So here is the second mushroom. I think it turned out okay, all things considered. It is a little rough looking, mostly due to how I had to handle the lighting, and I'll show you what I did momentarily. I will say that this one was a whole lot trickier to work with than this first one, both because of the lighting situation and just because of the shape in general. So that lighting situation is a problem that we're going to face a few times, I think. Basically, this mushroom didn't really have any spots that were flat, where I could hide lighting like I did in the first one, so I had to actually punch the holes into the mushroom itself, except for up here on the top. And I think that's okay, but it is kind of noticeable, and it makes it look a little bit messy. Now, I do have a solution for this, but, well, a potential solution, at least. We'll see how it looks, but unfortunately, we're going to need to wait until 1.12 to actually try it out. So for right now, this is what we're working with, and honestly, I think it's okay. Now, we have 2 mushrooms, and that's great, but, well, we've got a lot of cave to work with, and quite a lot of mushrooms to build, so this pace just isn't going to cut it. I think it's about time we kick it up a notch. Now that is what I'm talking about. Things are starting to look pretty crazy in here now that we have more mushrooms in place, and it's starting to feel like a proper mushroom biome rather than just a big cave with a mushroom in it. So I'm really happy with the direction this project has gone so far, but we do still have quite a few things left to do, and I actually thought of one more while I was building those mushrooms. So, when I very first thought of this project, I was doing some testing in a creative test world and building some mushrooms similar to these, and while I was doing it, I was naturally flying around, as you tend to do in creative mode, and it meant that I was always looking down on these mushrooms from above, rather than always looking up at them from below, like we have been in here. Now, as much as I love this perspective, I would also really like to have that other one. I would like to have the ability to look down and see all of these mushrooms from above, and kind of look down and see the whole project as a whole as well, sort of like how we would if we were doing this in creative. And I think one way that we can pull that perspective off is by adding a ledge up on the cave wall somewhere. Now, I've thought about this a bit, and I honestly think that right back here is pretty much the perfect place for it, despite the fact that this giant green mushroom is going to obscure it a little bit. But right about here is kind of the midpoint of the cave. It means we'll be able to kind of see everything from there relatively well. It also means that we can connect up to this little path relatively easy. So this is the entrance of the cave, if you weren't aware of that, and when we come on down, we'll be able to either go right and go straight to the mushrooms directly, or go left and go up a kind of little bit of a mini cave and lead up to that ledge that I want to do. So let's actually try and dig our way up there. I'm not going to make the entire cave right now because, well, that would be a little bit tedious. But if we can dig our way up and get roughly where we want to be, I think that we can just make the ledge and go from there. Now, I'm thinking that that ledge should probably be up in the high 30s, because the floor of the cave is at about 20, so I think that being around the high 30s should give us a decent height to work with. A little bit of coal in here. We should be pretty close at this point, I imagine. Yep, so I'm guessing that right here, my walls are hollow, if you weren't aware. I had to build them up in order to get the effect that we got. So here we are at Y38, and yeah, I think that this is a pretty good height. This is kind of the effect that I want, to be able to look down and just see a big chunk of the cave all at once. So we'll come out and we'll have a bit of a ledge situation. And obviously I will be modifying this and making it look better. We don't want the wall like going off behind the ledge and stuff like that. But we just want this ledge to kind of lead over. I think this is good. We maybe want it to come this way a little bit as well. And obviously we'll also build it out a bit more. Something like so. If I can click properly. And of course, you know, we're not just going to have flat edges. We'll make it look a bit more natural and everything. But here is sort of the idea. We'll have a ledge that we can walk up to and just look down and admire the ridiculousness that is this cave. So that's also going to serve the purpose of improving the wall of the cave a little bit, because currently the walls of the cave are pretty boring. But when we have this ledge, and obviously we'll build it down into the wall and make it look like it's a natural part of the cave, but it'll be a nice break point, and maybe we'll even put mycelium on top of it to kind of differentiate it from the stone a bit more. Now, that's not the only thing we're going to actually add to the walls. We're also going to be adding a few more mushrooms. Surprise, surprise. Now, we're not going to go too crazy with it, but I want to have just a handful of these mushrooms that are actually growing out of the wall itself, and put them in a few spots that feel kind of bare, because right now there's just way too much wasted space on the walls. I think that once we do that, the walls will start coming alive a bit, and it'll feel just that much more alive down here, and it should make the project feel even crazier. So, let's go ahead and get started with that and see how it looks. So here is the ledge. Overall, I think it's pretty good. I think the shape leading into the wall could use a little bit more work, but for the most part, I think it looks good, and I think it serves its purpose quite well. It breaks up the cave wall a bit, and it also gives us a nice view down into the cave itself. In fact, let's actually go take a look at that view now. I did also, in between clips, work out the cave that leads up to it. It's nothing particularly interesting, just a bland, tiny little cave, but I think that's all it really needs to be. And then once you get up here, you're greeted with a pretty nice view, which I am still quite a fan of. I think that once this project is completed and we have a lot of detail going on the ground and no longer have these torches, it's going to be really cool to come up here and see it all at once. Now, it's a little unfortunate that the most prominent thing in our view is the ugliest angle of our angled mushroom, but other than that, I think it turned out pretty good. We also went ahead and built some of these mushrooms coming out of the cave walls, which I think was actually a really smart idea, because it added sort of a kind of a vertical element to the cave. It added a reason to look up rather than just looking at the mushrooms that are down on the ground level, and I think that was something that we really needed to do. Now, overall, I like them. I think the two back here are a little questionable. The green one, I think, is a little too big, and the brown ones, while I like them a lot, they're meant to represent those shelf mushrooms that you see growing on the side of trees sometimes. And I really like the idea, but they ended up a little bit bulky to get the shape that I wanted, so they're a little strange looking. Overall, I think they're nice, though, and we're probably going to keep them. So now that that's done, we can move on to the next step in our cave, which is going to be the ceiling. Now, I asked you guys about the ceiling at the end of episode number 1, and to my surprise, I actually got tons of really, really cool suggestions from you guys. In fact, some of them I may even be using in future projects as well. But I also put forth my own idea to have a kind of a crack going down the middle and let the nature in just a little bit. From the surface of the island, I mean. And that was actually by far the most well-received idea. Lots of people really liked it. At the same time, there were a handful of people that were leery of it, probably for the same reasons that I was, and you didn't really want the cave to be brightened up by natural sunlight. And like I said in episode number 1, I felt the same way. However, after a bit of testing and planning, I think that we can actually go ahead and do this idea, have that crack going through the ceiling of the cave, yet still have complete control over how much light is down here. Now, I'll explain how we do that momentarily. We're actually going to head up to the surface of the island for that, maybe get a breath of fresh air after being down in this cave for 2 episodes. And I'll get back to you guys once we're up there and ready to start on that crack. So here we are on the surface of my island, and if we veer over this way, we're going to get to the spot where we want that crack in the surface to be. Now, right now we're pretty much walking on top of the mushroom cavern. In fact, pretty much everything that you see over here is built on top of it, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But the most important spot is right here. This is roughly the middle area for our cave, and this is where we want that little chasm that we're going to be building to go. And we're not going to just make a big straight line. We do want it to kind of wave around and weave around the things on the islands. Mostly weaving around this, because I don't want to have to dig through this to get down to the cave. But from right here, I think, is a good starting point. And we're going to lay out a little bit of a path with torches, just so I have a good idea of where I'm going. And we're also, along the way, going to try and stick kind of close to these trees. Both because it'll give us an excuse to utilize the roots and put them through the cave ceiling if we want to, but also because the trees themselves will help with our lighting situation. So, the problem with the lighting that we were going to face with this idea is that sunlight is very, very bright. If you weren't aware of how sunlight works, it basically comes from straight up in the sky and makes a pillar all the way down to the ground. And once it hits a solid block, it stops, but all of the air blocks that it hits along the way are basically light sources with a light level of 15. So it's sort of like a giant pillar of glowstone going all the way down to the ground. We just can't see it. And if we were to poke even a single hole down to the cave floor and just allow the light to go all the way down, it would be super duper bright and it would light up everything in the area. Now, that is okay, but we don't want to do that in a large quantity. We don't want a big strip of that going right down the middle of the cave. It would make it way too bright down there. So what we can do is be very, very careful with the placement of our blocks and actually prevent the light from reaching the floor of the cave. So with this ravine, what we can actually do is just kind of keep everything contained. It'll be relatively narrow. It's not going to be like a huge chasm in the island. But if we make it like, say, 2 to 4 blocks wide or so, we can kind of layer stone over each other and give it kind of a jagged edge. And at the same time, we can also prevent it with other things. For example, leaves. That's why we actually built the path really close to trees, is because the leaves will also block sunlight. So while we're underneath these trees, we can actually have like open blocks and the sun still won't beam all the way down to the cave floor, which is quite nice. And then any other spots that we have along the way, we can just kind of work around. We just need to be careful not to allow too much sunlight down there. Now, if we want to keep the cave floor completely dark, we can do that. We just need to make sure that every single block is covered in some way. But we can also experiment with it a little bit, which I think is going to be the main benefit of going this route, and allow just 1 or 2 spots of bright sunlight down to the cave floor, which I think that overall will actually be the best way to go, because I think it's going to create this really dynamic lighting situation, and I'm really curious how that's actually going to turn out. So I'm actually going to get to this and start digging away our little chasm here, get to detailing it and stuff, and hopefully it turns out okay. We'll see the end result, and I'll get back to you guys when it's done. So here is our little chasm through the surface of our island, and overall I think it's okay, but to be honest, it is probably going to be changing quite a lot in episode number 3. I'm still a big fan of this idea. I still want to keep the idea of a ravine going through the surface of our island, and I want to keep the idea of blocking out the sunlight, except for where we want it to get down to the cave floor, but I think that my implementation is just a little bit too chaotic here. I don't think that this is inherently wrong, I don't think that it looks particularly bad, and I think that ground crumbling in like this would be a bit messy, but it's just a little bit too much, and I think that the surface of the island will look better if I come up with a slightly more refined way to do this. Now, I do have a plan for that. I do have a way that I should be able to clean this up and remove the cluttery feel of it and still block out the sunlight where I need to. The issue is that that's going to take quite a bit of time, and time is something I currently don't have. It's already pushing into the wee morning hours, and I unfortunately just can't really postpone this video any longer than I already have. So we're going to go ahead and call it here for today, and I want to hear your guys' feedback, so this is actually kind of a good thing that we can pause right here. If you have any ideas of your own for this, or even if you just prefer it messy like this, be sure to tell me, because I would like to know. While I do have ideas of my own on how to solve this, you guys may have even better ideas, and it's always worth hearing them. So again, be sure to tell me if you do have an idea. Now, before we head off, let's go down and check it out from the bottom as well, because, well, I did do a little bit of work down here. Not a whole lot, because, like I said, I am a little bit rushed at the moment. But this should get you a pretty good idea of what it's going to feel like. We're going to have some leaves pouring in and stuff. They will be a little more dynamically shaped and not just straight pillars down like they currently are. And we're also going to have some stalactites. I've put in about 5 of them right here, and overall I think they're really cool. I think if the entire cave ceiling is kind of dotted with them, it'll look really, really neat. Especially if the leaves kind of occasionally reach over and grab one like they did here. Stuff like that I think will make this ceiling look pretty cool. And also, despite the fact that you can't tell due to all the torches, there's no real light getting down here either, and that's something that I want to maintain. So I think overall this is a pretty good look at what it's going to look like in the end, at least from down here. Up above, we're going to be changing it quite a lot. So, like I said, it is about time that we get going. It's 2 in the morning. I really need to finish this episode up. I still have quite a lot of editing to do, in fact. And again, be sure to tell me any of your views, any of your opinions on things we can do up there, as well as anywhere else if you have views on that. And again, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you had fun, even though it was a super chaotic, super rushed episode, especially here at the end. I know it was also a bit time-lapse heavy, but you guys seem to enjoy that, so hello, semi-truck. Sorry about that. Again, thank you guys for watching everything. Completely lost my train of thought thanks to that. Anyway, it's been good. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.